Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 TV and movie roles that were successfully recast. Number 10. Back to the Future, Jennifer Parker.
In the first film, Jennifer Parker wasn't a particularly big part, given the fact that our intrepid skateboarding hero spent the bulk of the movie 30 years in the past. But Marty's girlfriend made bookend appearances, and the film ended with Doc Brown scooping both Marty and Jennifer up and whisking them away to 2015. And then Back to the Future 2 came out, promising eager children that they'd have hoverboards, and then dashing our hopes when the toy industry failed to deliver that last year. Oh, and there was suddenly a new actress playing the role of Jennifer just in time for her to actually participate in the plot. Claudia Wells played the original Jennifer, but was replaced by everyone's favorite 80s crush Elizabeth Shue when Wells backed out of the films to care for her dying mother. By the way, we use the term original Jennifer loosely since you probably didn't realize that another actress was cast prior to Wells, Melora Hardin, best known as Jan from the US version of The Office.
Number 9. Game of Thrones, Dario Naharis.
For the most part, the casting directors of Game of Thrones have hit home runs with virtually every role, to the point where it seems inconceivable that they'd ever want or need to recast any of the major speaking parts. Somewhat surprisingly, they've actually done it a few times, from The Mountain to Tommen Baratheon. But in most cases, the character had originally been so minor that no one noticed. That wasn't the case with the role of Dario Naharis, though. One of Daenerys Targaryen's most trusted warriors, actor Ed Skrein originated the role on screen, only to be replaced for reasons that remain a little unclear. Skrein supposedly left the show in order to take over the Transporter series, but the actor insists it was politics that led to his recasting. Michael Huisman took over the role in the 4th season, and despite a pretty jarring physical change to the character, has settled in well and made it his own.
Number 8. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Aunt Viv.
Everyone loved Aunt Viv, right? The cool, strong, funny aunt to Will Smith's, Will Smith character on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She was the kind of extended family member everyone wanted. She'd always fight for her family and wouldn't let anyone push her around. Except apparently the actress who originally played Aunt Viv, Janet Hubert, would rather push Will Smith in front of a bus than save him from being hit. Things were, and remain, more than a little contentious between Hubert and the erstwhile Fresh Prince. The feud between Hubert and Smith really took off when she says Smith had her removed from the series. Smith and Alfonso Ribeiro, meanwhile, paint a different picture, that of a bitter, controlling actress who would fly off the handle for virtually no reason. The feud is far from over too, given that Hubert recently took to the internet with a video calling out Will and Jada Pinkett Smith for their comments about boycotting the Oscars. Still, things managed to chug right along with Fresh Prince after Daphne Maxwell-Reid stepped into the Aunt Viv role, and the series even gave a little wink and nudge to the audience in her first appearance, with the character of Jazz noting something amiss about Vivian Banks, while everyone else pretended not to notice.
Number 7. The Dark Knight, Rachel Dawes.
Usually when you talk about comic book movies doing some recasting, you're referring to a situation like the jump from Batman Returns to Batman Forever, where Bruce Wayne changed from Michael Keaton to Val Kilmer. Of course, those movies were connected in name only, much the way you can't really call Andrew Garfield being cast as Spider-Man a recasting after Tobey Maguire originated the role on screen. But in the case of the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, there was one very notable recasting, and frankly most people seem to agree it worked out for the best. Rachel Dawes is a fairly minor part in the Batman mythos, but she was an essential motivating factor for Christian Bale's Batman. Katie Holmes originated the character, but the rumors have flown that she was pretty unpopular on the set of Batman Begins, leading to her replacement by Maggie Gyllenhaal in The Dark Knight. Now Holmes insists that it was her decision to move on from the Dark Knight series in order to make a movie called Mad Money, but frankly, if you've ever seen the trailer for that film, you have to realize that no one would willingly put themselves through that kind of torture if they had a better alternative.
Number 6. Iron Man 2, James Rhodes / War Machine.
It's kind of amazing to think that a supporting actor in a superhero franchise would not only expect, but demand to make the same kind of money as the titular hero. But that's sort of what happened with Terrence Howard in the Iron Man franchise. Now, that's maybe a bit misleading, so let's straighten things out, at least from Howard's perspective. In the first Iron Man, the actor received $8 million to portray James Rhodes, the man who would be War Machine, and once the sequel was in the works, Marvel decided it only needed to pay Howard $1 million, while Robert Downey Jr. got a significant pay increase. So rather than sit around trying to negotiate with a bitter actor trying to fill the sidekick role, the studio moved on and locked in Don Cheadle, in the process really upgrading the work being done as James Rhodes. While Howard's a fine actor, of course, it quickly became apparent in the subsequent Marvel Cinematic Universe films that Cheadle's easy rapport with Downey was better than Howard's, and the rest, as they say, is movie history.
Number 5. Roseanne-Becky Conner.
We already mentioned a tendency for sitcoms to kind of wink knowingly at the audience when a key cast member needs to be replaced in the entry about Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But no show in history has ever taken as much joy at twisting the laughs out of a recasting like Roseanne. Lacey Goranson originated the role of oldest Connor offspring Becky and churned out 5 seasons in the part before deciding to leave the show and Hollywood in order to go to college. The series moved on quickly, casting Sarah Chalke, who you probably know from Scrubs, as the new Becky, and made frequent jokes about the jarring difference between the two actresses. Chalke was solid in the role, but it was that sly sense of humor about the whole situation that really elevates this recasting. In one late episode, they even have a flash-forward of John Goodman as a grown-up DJ Connor, now seeing a psychiatrist and repeating the phrase, "They say she's the same, but she's not the same," in reference to his older sister.
Number 4. The Honeymooners, Alice Kramden.
What are you talking about? We're sure you're thinking right now. There was only ever one Alice Kramden, you liar. Well, first of all, please remember that words hurt. And also, you're the one who's wrong, because there most certainly was a first decidedly non-Audrey Meadows version of Ralph Kramden's long-suffering wife on the iconic sitcom The Honeymooners. Initially, an actress named Pert Kelton, who starred alongside Jackie Gleason for 7 episodes, played Alice. Then Joseph McCarthy had to go and ruin everything. Yes, believe it or not, one of the most famous television wives in history had to be recast, thanks to one of every American's favorite domestic embarrassment, McCarthyism. Kelton and her husband were blacklisted, leading to her being booted from the show despite Gleason fighting for her to remain as a part of the series. Unfortunately, the Red Scare won out and Kelton left the show under the pretenses of heart trouble. Eventually, Gleason brought Kelton back, not as Alice, but Alice's mother, in a second musical version of The Honeymooners in the 1960s.
Number 3. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Dumbledore.
Long before Severus Snape killed Dumbledore, spoilers, Hodgkin's disease and pneumonia did in the most famous Hogwarts headmaster of them all. When Richard Harris passed away in 2002, it left the filmmakers behind the Harry Potter series in a bit of a bind, since Harris had only starred in 2 of the films and there were 5 more books left to be translated to the big screen. After some initial pushback from the fans who were unsure what to make of Michael Gambon's performance as Albus Dumbledore, the actor soon made the role his own and won over the skeptics in the audience, probably at least in part because they realized the Sorcerer's Stone isn't real and Richard Harris wasn't coming back. Gambon added a bit of whimsy to the character that Harris, who had plenty of gravitas but played the role more or less straight and decidedly cuddlier, never really had. Gambon's Dumbledore was more playful and a bit more sly and egotistical, ultimately hewing closer to those aspects of the character that popped up in the books, kind of amazing when you consider Gambon never bothered to read the series.
Number 2. Batman TV series, Catwoman.
Batman has had many foes over the years, but apart from perhaps the Joker, none have been quite so beloved as his sometimes love interest, sometimes nemesis Catwoman. And during the 1960s television run for Adam West's Batman, it must have gotten a little confusing for the Caped Crusader when he was tasked with taking down his feline enemy, considering she was portrayed by 3 different actresses. Originally, the role was played by Julie Newmar for 2 seasons, before Lee Meriwether stepped into the role. But perhaps the most memorable version of Catwoman was also the last from the series, in a bit of recasting that, if done today, would set the internet comment section aflame, considering what had, up to that point, been a role played by 2 white actresses was recast with a black performer, Eartha Kitt.
Number 1. Bewitched, Darrin Stevens.
And of course, the top spot is reserved for perhaps the most famous television recasting of them all. It's not as successful as some of the other recasting jobs on the list, but given its place in TV history, it has to be right here at number 1. We're talking, of course, about Dick Sargent replacing Dick York on the series Bewitched. This wasn't just some random side character that was being recast either, this was more or less the equivalent of Ted Danson suddenly being swapped out in Cheers. That's because Darrin Stevens, while a supporting role to Elizabeth Montgomery's lead witch character of Samantha, was one of the 2 leads on the show. Dick York originated the role of Darrin, but unfortunately, the actor suffered a serious injury while working on a movie, and with his health in serious jeopardy, he decided it was in everyone's best interests if he quit the show. Dick Sargent took over the role, performing admirably, though ultimately the fans found the change too jarring, and the show was cancelled relatively shortly into Sargent's run as Darrin.
So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a like below, it really helps out. And don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this, 7 days a week. Also over there on the right are a couple of other videos you'll probably enjoy if you enjoyed this one. One is the top 10 amazing facts about The Simpsons, and below that we've got the top 10 shocking moments that were caught on live TV. So be sure to check both of those out, be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.